Picture this: a massive island covered in ice. Fewer people than a medium-sized American city. No Silicon Valley, no Wall Street, no headline-grabbing wars. On the surface, Greenland looks irrelevant. And yet, behind closed doors, the world's largest military and economic powers quietly treat it like a strategic keystone. Something you don't ignore, something you don't leave unattended. Now fast forward. It's not just diplomats talking about Greenland anymore. It shows up in military planning, in trade routes, and resource projections, in Arctic maps that suddenly look very different than they did 20 years ago. This isn't about a crazy headline. It isn't about a one-off political stunt. And it definitely isn't about buying land. Now wake up. It's September 2026. The United States' interest in Greenland isn't new. But the reason it matters has changed, and most people are still looking at the wrong explanation. Tonight, we're going to walk through why Greenland quietly moved from the margins of history to the center of strategic planning, step by step. Not ideology, not nationalism, incentives, geography, systems. Well, for one, the map lie. Why Greenland looks smaller than it really is, meet Thomas. Thomas isn't a politician. He's a logistics planner. His job is to move things, ships, aircraft, fuel, supplies, across oceans and continents efficiently. He doesn't care about flags. He cares about distance, time, and choke points. And this is where the first illusion breaks. Most people have never actually seen Greenland correctly. On common world maps, Greenland looks like a side character. Big, yes, but distant. Peripheral, frozen, something you fly around, not through. In reality, Greenland sits at the exact intersection of North America, Europe, and the Arctic. The mechanism here is brutally simple. As polar ice recedes, the Arctic stops being a barrier and starts becoming a corridor. Routes that once didn't exist suddenly do, and when routes change, geography reasserts itself with force. Greenland isn't at the edge of the world. It's at the center of emerging paths. For military planners, that means early warning. For shipping, it means shorter routes. For energy and data infrastructure, it means control over transit and access. Maps lie by flattening reality. Strategy doesn't. And once you understand Greenland's true position, the next question becomes unavoidable. If this island matters that much geographically, who ensures it stays aligned, and why? Part 2, the security anchor, why defense comes before resources. Meet Laura. Laura works in long-term security planning. Her job isn't to predict the next conflict. It's to prevent being surprised by one. She thinks in decades, not election cycles. For her, Greenland isn't about profit. It's about detection and denial. This is the part that often gets misunderstood. Before anyone talks about minerals, trade, or climate opportunity, military logic moves first, always. Greenland sits astride key Arctic air and sea approaches. Any shift in control, access, or influence there changes early warning timelines, missile detection windows, and response depth. This isn't paranoia, it's math. The mechanism is simple. As great power competition returns, response time matters more than ever. The earlier you see something, the more options you have. The later you see it, the fewer choices remain. Greenland functions as a forward sensor, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unavoidable. And here's the critical detail most headlines miss. The United States doesn't need to own Greenland to care deeply about it. It needs stability, access, and alignment. Security partnerships come before economic ones, because once security shifts, economics follow whether you like it or not. This isn't about conquest. It's about preventing strategic vacuum, because vacuums don't stay empty for long. The number 3, the climate switch, when ice stops protecting you. Meet Niels. Niels grew up believing Greenland's ice was a shield. It isolated the island. It kept outsiders away. It made large-scale exploitation impractical. That assumption no longer holds. Climate change doesn't just melt ice, it reorders incentives. The mechanism here is uncomfortable but unavoidable. As ice retreats, accessibility increases. As accessibility increases, interest accelerates. And once multiple powers see opportunity in the same place, neutrality becomes harder to maintain. This is where Greenland's situation becomes uniquely delicate. The island didn't suddenly become valuable. It became reachable. Resources that were theoretical become measurable. Routes that were seasonal become navigable. Infrastructure that made no sense suddenly does. And when that happens, powerful actors don't ask if they should care. They ask who else will. This is the moment where history usually speeds up. Not because anyone wants conflict, but because incentives converge. And that convergence puts Greenland in a position it didn't choose. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. No sudden takeover. No headline-worthy crisis. Just attention. And in geopolitics, attention is never neutral. In part 2, we're going to look at the economic layer people keep skipping. Resources, supply chains, and why Greenland matters far beyond its borders. Not just to the US, but to everyone watching quietly. And once people get past the maps and the military logic, they usually land on the next assumption. It's about resources. That explanation isn't wrong, but it's incomplete, because the real story isn't just what's under the ice. It's where Greenland sits inside future supply chains, and what happens when the world realizes certain inputs are no longer optional. Row 4. The resource illusion. It's not about gold rushes. Meet Evan. Evan works in long-range resource planning. His job isn't to chase the next boom. It's to make sure entire industries don't stall 10 years from now because something basic becomes unavailable. When people hear Greenland resources, they imagine a modern gold rush, rare earths, minerals, oil, a scramble to dig everything up. That's not how this actually works. The mechanism is slower and more strategic. Modern economies don't collapse when luxury inputs disappear. They collapse when boring but irreplaceable materials become constrained. Inputs that don't make headlines, but sit inside batteries, missiles, medical equipment, satellites, grids, and data centers. Greenland matters because it sits adjacent to multiple categories of strategic materials, not because it's about immediate extraction. Here's the key misunderstanding. Resources only matter if you can. Access them safely, transport them reliably, process them without hostile choke points. Greenland checks the first 2 boxes in a future where Arctic access increases, and that alone changes planning assumptions. No one is betting the global economy on Greenland tomorrow. They're making sure they're not locked out later. That's the difference between speculation and strategy, and this is where the conversation quietly shifts from geology to logistics. 5. Supply chains. Hate uncertainty, and Greenland reduces it. Meet Rachel. Rachel designs supply chains. Her nightmare scenario isn't higher costs, it's disruption, delays, sanctions, choke points controlled by rivals, routes that look efficient until they suddenly aren't. For decades, global trade relied on a handful of narrow corridors, specific canals, specific straits, specific political assumptions. That system is cracking. As geopolitical risk rises, redundancy becomes more valuable than efficiency. Routes that were once unnecessary become insurance policies. This is where Greenland's role becomes clearer. The Arctic isn't just a shorter path, it's a different path. One that bypasses some of the world's most congested and politically sensitive bottlenecks. One that reduces reliance on routes that assume perpetual cooperation. And Greenland sits near the center of that shift, not as a hub of commerce, but as an anchor point. A place where infrastructure, monitoring, refueling, and coordination become possible. Supply chains don't care about ideology, they care about resilience. And as the global system moves from just in time to just in case, geography regains power. This is why interest in Greenland rises quietly, not loudly. Loud moves signal panic, quiet moves signal planning. But there's another layer people keep missing. Because supply chains don't just move goods, they move influence. Turn to 6, the influence layer. Why alignment matters. More than ownership, meet Mikkel. Mikkel lives in Greenland. He hears the outside narratives constantly. That Greenland is being fought over, that powerful countries want to control it, that locals will lose autonomy. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern power doesn't require formal ownership. It requires alignment, access agreements, infrastructure investment, defense cooperation, standards, data sharing, emergency response integration. This is how influence works now. The U.S. doesn't need Greenland to become American. It needs Greenland to not drift into someone else's orbit. That's the real tension. In a multipolar world, unaligned strategic spaces attract attention, not because anyone wants conflict, but because no one wants surprise. From Greenland's perspective, this creates a dilemma. Remaining neutral becomes harder as attention increases. Choosing partnerships becomes unavoidable, and every choice has trade-offs. This is why the conversation feels uncomfortable on all sides. For the U.S., Greenland represents stability and predictability in a changing Arctic. For Greenland, the attention brings opportunity and pressure. And this is where the story usually gets flattened into a false binary. Either America is exploiting Greenland, or Greenland should be grateful for protection. Reality is messier. This isn't about gratitude, it's about incentives converging faster than governance structures can adapt. And when that happens, small players often feel like the choice is being made around them, not with them. At this point, we've covered geography, security, resources, supply chains, and alignment, but we haven't answered the most important question yet. Why should Greenlanders themselves want deeper engagement at all instead of resisting it? And what happens if they don't? That's where this story stops being about global strategy and starts being about sovereignty, leverage, and survival in a system that doesn't pause for consent. By the time the world realizes a place matters, that place is already under pressure. Not invasion pressure, not takeover pressure, decision pressure. This is the phase Greenland is entering now, where staying on the sidelines stops being a neutral option. Number 7. The sovereignty. Paradox: when independence requires leverage, meet Akaluk. Akaluk believes deeply in Greenlandic self-determination, cultural autonomy, political independence, the right to decide Greenland's future without being pulled into great power games. But here's the paradox he's running into. In the modern world, sovereignty isn't protected by distance or isolation. It's protected by leverage. The mechanism is uncomfortable but consistent. Small populations with large strategic footprints don't get ignored. They get tested, not through force, but through offers, dependencies, and infrastructure that slowly becomes indispensable. True independence doesn't mean refusing engagement. It means choosing partnerships from a position of strength. And strength today isn't measured only in population or GDP. It's measured in access, alignment, and the ability to say no because you've already said yes on your own terms. This is why Greenland's choices matter now, not later. Waiting doesn't freeze the board. It lets others position pieces first. So 8. Why Greenlanders should want strategic engagement carefully. This is where the conversation usually becomes emotional, and it shouldn't. Wanting partnership doesn't mean surrendering identity. Rejecting partnership doesn't guarantee protection. Here's the hard reality. Greenland already depends on external systems for defense, trade, healthcare access, logistics, and technology. The question isn't whether Greenland engages, it's how intentionally. Strategic engagement can bring infrastructure investment that benefits locals. First, diversification away from a single dependency leverage in negotiations instead of isolation. Environmental oversight shaped by Greenlandic standards, not imposed after the fact. Avoiding engagement doesn't stop interest. It just removes Greenland's ability to shape outcomes. The risk isn't cooperation. The risk is passive exposure. History shows that regions which actively structure partnerships tend to preserve more autonomy than those that resist until pressure becomes unavoidable. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about choosing terms. Letter 9. Final synthesis. Why Greenland matters and what comes next. So let's answer the title directly. The United States isn't obsessed with Greenland because of ice, headlines, or short-term politics. It's focused on Greenland because geography is reasserting power, Arctic. Access is shifting global routes, supply chains, demand redundancy, security planning values, early positioning, and unaligned strategic spaces. Don't stay unaligned for long. This isn't a land grab. It's a systems response to a world becoming less predictable. Now, what happens next? There are 3 realistic paths. Base case: Greenland deepens strategic partnerships incrementally. Infrastructure grows slowly. Alignment increases quietly. Autonomy remains, but with tighter integration into Western systems. Better case: Greenland leverages interest to secure favorable terms. Investment, environmental safeguards, education, and long-term development that strengthens internal capacity. Engagement becomes a tool, not a threat. Worst case: interest accelerates faster than governance adapts. External pressure outpaces local control. Decisions get framed as urgent instead of intentional. What should people actually watch? Not headlines, signals. Watch Arctic infrastructure funding. Watch shipping insurance routes. Watch defense cooperation language. Watch who builds, who maintains, and who controls logistics. Watch whether Greenland sets terms or inherits them. Adaptation without panic. This story isn't about fear. It's about realism. The Arctic is changing. Geography is coming back. And Greenland sits in a place the modern world can't ignore anymore. For the United States, engagement is about stability. For Greenland, engagement can be about leverage, if handled deliberately. The mistake would be pretending attention will fade. It won't. The only question left is whether Greenland shapes the future, or reacts to it. If this breakdown helped clarify what's really going on beneath the headlines, let me know which layer surprised you most. Geography, supply chains, or sovereignty? Subscribe to The Quiet Market for calm, system-level explanations of how power, markets, and incentives quietly reshape the world. And if you want to see how similar dynamics are already playing out elsewhere, our next breakdown looks at how strategic geography is rewriting entire economies. Thanks for watching.